Hello, Barry, and hello, everyone on Across the Pond. Man, it's been a long time. Dude, we actually skipped a week for the second time in our history, just because life has been crazy on both ends of the pond. We've been battling against internet connections, Barry, but against actual power, electricity, all sorts of stuff has been just holding us from getting together and catching up as always. How's it going, man?
It's going well, Chad. It's so good to be back. But like you say, it does feel like a while since we did the last one. And as you intimated, we've both had kind of rough weeks, right?
Yeah.
We've both been like moving houses, trying to get all that sorted, moving things around, trying to fix internet stuff, like you say. And it's just been a rather wild couple of days. And so I feel like we've been a little bit rusty, Chad. It feels like it's been a long time since you're doing this. But for those of you watching on YouTube, Chad's got this very Joe Rogan-esque aesthetic right now. So he's looking sharp on that side. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen in this episode.
Yeah, you know me. I'm way too fussy, Barry, when it comes to production value. And the last, was it 2 episodes that we put out, where I've been using basically the little mic that sits on top of my camera. And it's been better than nothing, but it certainly isn't at that level that we need. So, because all my stuff is in a storage unit and my mic is at the back of the said storage unit, I had to go and pick up something else. And what's really cool with this is it literally just plugs in with USB. It's got an XLR input as well, so if you do want to use it with the sound card, you can. But what's nice is you can plug in, get started, get set up. And as you said, Barry, we're living this digital nomad life, or as I like to call it, a digital noob life, because I'm clearly not getting it right.
Yeah, definitely. We're both coming to you from different undisclosed locations tonight. So it's a very, very interesting episode. And hopefully the audio, like you say, is sounding crispy and smooth on your side. But if you've been sticking with us and been missing us over the past few weeks, we're glad to be back. We're glad to be in front of you today. And whether you're watching or listening in real time or after the fact, there's loads to get into tonight, Chad.
Absolutely, yeah. So let's get right into it.
The week that was.
As we start off with the week that was, Barry, there was a great little shudder of thunder in the background there, making me really quite jealous not to be in Johannesburg. You're on quite the storm right now.
Yeah, there's one brewing as we speak, Chad. So if you start to hear chaos outside, that's just the typical Joburg thunderstorms that we all know and love. But hopefully it'll be short and sweet as they often are. So yeah, it's one of the best parts about Joburg, to be honest. There's nothing better than getting into bed and hearing that thunder, hearing the rain patter down, reading a good book before bed. There's few better feelings in the world.
Few better feelings, Barry, but the timing of this chaos outside, as you call it, couldn't have been better, because we're starting off this episode with some pretty chaotic news. Obviously, we always sort of start off with stuff that's happened in the past week, and in this case, it's been the progression of the last 2 weeks. The escalation of the COVID situation in India has really just been quite staggering, honestly, to see from the other side of the world. Obviously, we've seen all countries have their peaks, but this one just seems, it far outreaches anything we've seen before. We're talking about 300,000 to 400,000 new cases per day. In terms of deaths, in terms of the actual stat of deaths, we're looking at the 7-day average sitting around 3,400 a day, which is just nuts. And I've put 2 benchmarks there just for us on our respective sides of the pond. At the UK at its peak was a number of about 1,250 a day. And SA at its peak was a number of 600 a day. So 3,400 a day, just ridiculous. I mean, I've just brought up on screen now as well as we're talking, just the kind of charts as things stand. And, just to have a look at the difference between India's first peak and where they are right now, it really is pretty scary stuff.
Yeah, it really is, Chad. And like you say, it's the worst peak of any country in the world throughout this whole pandemic. It's kind of dwarfed everything, including Italy and Spain and the US and all of the chaos that's happened around the world. And what makes it so devastating and so difficult is that we kind of thought we were past a lot of this, right? A lot of us are talking about vaccines, and we had these conversations about getting things under control, and all of a sudden you see India's numbers do what they're doing, and it's really devastating. I think the turmoil in that country at the moment is really tough to watch, and everything I read about and I see the stories and I see the videos, it breaks my heart. It really does. And what's also scary about this, Chad, is that they think that these numbers are underreported.
Yeah.
Much like a lot of the third world, testing is not as readily available as you would like, and so a lot of people aren't getting tested at all. And also, a lot of people aren't even getting to the hospitals because they're dying outside in the rural areas. So these numbers could be orders of magnitude bigger than what we realize, just because the rural areas are not getting the attention that they should be getting. So scary numbers, Chad.
Yeah, definitely. And the underreporting, I think, that's been a problem in a lot of countries, but more specifically in India, where you kind of look at the low testing rates as one part, but the other part is like you say, all the rural areas, and a lot of the deaths happening in the rural areas, kind of just not making their way onto these stats and these figures that we're showing in front of you right now. So just in terms of what this means, I mean, we've seen a lot of countries around the world have been trying to protect their respective public health systems from not being able to cope. I mean, that's in the UK certainly has been, protect the NHS has been the front and center. And what we've got in India is there is a real struggle for hospitals to keep up with this kind of with this level of infection of this disease. You've got shortage of beds and oxygen, and as a result, a lot of countries throughout the world kind of trying to step in as much as they can and send sort of oxygen supplies, send ventilators, all that kind of stuff. But just on these sheer volumes, it doesn't really seem like any of that's going to be enough.
Yeah, it's really tough to see. I mean, what kind of brought it home to me was that I saw a video of this guy who had kind of emptied out this big kind of minibus taxi and had turned it into a mobile oxygen type lab sitting outside one of the hospitals. And basically, I don't know how he got this, but he got some sort of oxygen tank, and he was kind of giving people 2 or 3 breaths of oxygen, and they were just standing in a line outside this guy's car to try and get a little bit of respite while they were trying to get into the hospitals. So the whole health system is completely overwhelmed. It isn't. I mean, India's public health system wasn't great to start with, and these numbers are just they're not feasible, right? So even in your major cities like Delhi and whatnot, these hospitals are getting overrun, which is to say nothing about the second and third tier cities that don't have the resources that Delhi and Mumbai and these places do. And so really, really difficult to see. The videos are terrifying. And also what's also scary, Chad, is that there's all these talks of these new variants that are coming up. Yeah. And the question is, like, with these new variants, like how much of the vaccine or the vaccines we've already developed, are they going to be helpful? Are they actually going to help in these cases? And what are they going to be able to do to kind of manage the strain? Like it's hard right now to go into a full lockdown. I think that they've been like reluctant to do so for economic reasons and trying to keep things alive, to keep people fed and keep people working. But when you're having these sorts of numbers, like what are you supposed to do? How do you manage things and get them under control? It's all very well for the US and them to send ventilators across, but you need way more than just ventilators. Definitely. You need a whole public health system response, right? Which is tough.
It is, and your point there, Barry, just in terms of the lockdown and being reluctant to impose a lockdown. The Prime Minister's been under quite a bit of scrutiny for not actually imposing that national lockdown. There's been a lot of calls for it, but in these sort of third world countries, it really is tough to go to that length. Where the other hand of that is not having this economic activity means a lot of families are going to starve. So it really is quite a tricky act to sort of juggle. That variant as well, I think, is really concerning. I saw some news as well about Australia. I don't know if you've heard about it, Barry. Just completely banning any Australians who are currently in India from getting back home. And so it really is quite a concerning one when you look at the variant and I guess all of the concerns around it.
Yeah, it's a big reminder to us that we cannot get complacent about this thing. Like, this thing is not over, right? And these variants are going to continue to come out, and the question is, how do we manage them going forward? And like you say, Australia are one of those places that are taking a very hard line. I kind of realized because they cancelled the IPL, and the Australian cricketers couldn't even go home because they were playing in India. And so I think that countries around the world are be watching this very, very closely and thinking very carefully about how they deal with these things. But my gut feel, Chad, is that, and I think the science backs it up, is that we're going to see more of these variants going forward.
Definitely.
Like this COVID thing is not done, and so we have to get into our heads that even though I'm vaccinated, even though things seem to be a bit better and we're getting back into real life, we have to be vigilant and we have to take seriously any of these concerns that come out. I think that I was surprised by this India thing because in my mind it was over, Chad. In my mind we had got past the worst of the worst and things were getting better, right? But it's just a really, really stubborn virus, and that's what viruses do. And so, yeah, really sad to see. I hope they can figure out something. I hope they can get some help in that respect. But also the sad thing is that India are making a lot of the vaccines, right?
Yeah.
Like a large portion of the vaccines are being made in India. I know a lot of the ones that we bought here in South Africa come from India. And the sad irony is that they've been making for everyone else and now they don't have enough for themselves, right? Which is really sad to see. And so I believe they've stopped all exports and they're kind of keeping them all for themselves, which I understand. But yeah, it's tough, Chad. It's really, really tough.
Yeah, that was my first thing as well. It was really ironic that, yeah, like you said, they're kind of churning out crazy production quantities for the rest of the world, and yet they're facing a shortage themselves. So, I think certainly on the humanitarian front, holding back those vaccines and blocking the exports feels like the right thing to do when you've got these kind of numbers. But in terms of the contractual obligations, that's always going to be an interesting one to see how all of that stuff pans out. But hopefully the rest of the world will be understanding on this, because it certainly is quite a crazy situation. And I hope that that graph is at its peak. It does look to be easing off a little bit over the last couple of days. So I hope that is the case, because it's crazy high right now. So yeah, we'll certainly monitor that as things go on. Barry, tell us some news on your side in terms of COVID and the COVID response from a South African perspective.
Sure. So just a quick update on a story we covered in our last episode talking about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Now, if you remember, Chad, there was some concerns about blood clots from the guys in the US, and the US kind of paused their J&J deployment for a while, and South Africa kind of followed suit and just said, cool, we're going to wait to find out what's going on with these 6 or 7 patients who had experienced blood clots. It's now kind of they've done whatever research they were going to do, and they've decided, cool, it's worth going back to it. So the J&J is back. They've resumed deploying those vaccines. Again, not as fast as we would like. It's still super slow, but at least they're getting back out there. And the exciting news on this front is that our first batch of the Pfizer vaccines is now in the country. So I think that was a couple million, so that was really, really good to see. And so it's likely that the Johnson & Johnson is kind of going to be deprioritized and the Pfizer vaccines have become the main one that's been given out. And so, yeah, it's really good news for us. I hope that we start to see those vaccines going out beyond the healthcare workers in time. There's lots of talks about the various phases and starting with people with comorbidities and over a certain age and whatnot. What I found interesting, Chad, was that I got an email from Discovery Health. Now, for those who don't know, Discovery is probably the biggest medical aid provider here in the country, and I'm on their medical aid. And basically, their email was a very detailed and very passionate kind of explanation of what Discovery are doing to procure the vaccines for people on their medical aid and getting them into their arms. So basically, if you're a Discovery member, it sounds like they're going to go above and beyond to try and get you the vaccine earlier than you would have if you had to go through the government kind of deployment thing. So from the sounds of it, and basically talking to some of the healthcare professionals that I know in my friend group, for example, I might actually get the vaccine earlier than I realized because I'm with Discovery. And so the question is, there's ethical questions here as to like how this should be done. Like, should Discovery be able to kind of vaccinate younger people before all of our older people are vaccinated, for example, and how that's all going to work is still yet to be seen. But the email was very convincing and persuasive, Chad. So I'm a little bit more optimistic that I will get my vaccine before 2024, which is good to see.
Yeah, that is good to see. I mean, one of the concerns about the vaccine and the procurement thereof is the price of it, I guess, in South Africa, and the government's ability to fund all of those purchases. So for me, it does make sense that a private provider can kind of get in there, get its own orders in. And let's not forget that some of the vaccines are currently being sold at cost. Some of the companies are not actually making any money on these vaccines just yet. So some of those costs aren't actually that crazy expensive. Just in terms of the kind of holding back and being comfortable with using the vaccine because of the blood clots, there was some news today actually coming out of the UK as well, Barry, on the story about the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine and the blood clots that we've also seen this side. And basically, the government's now taken the stance that anyone under the age of 40, actually, so previously it was under the age of 30, now it's 40, will be offered an alternative to the Oxford AstraZeneca. So since they had the press briefing, which was, the European Health Commission and the UK as well, they kind of did their briefings in tandem. Effectively, there's been now a whole lot more cases, and it seems like there is a correlation between younger sort of age groups. So they've taken that stance to offer alternatives, which is good as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the more the merrier, right? So if you can find alternatives and it's easily available, then for sure do it. And I don't think there's any need to kind of tittle-tale between the two. Like obviously there's going to be different efficacy rates and different kind of effects, but as long as you're getting whatever you have into your arms of your country, that's all good. Chad, do you have any idea when yours is coming? Have you heard anything on your side, or is it still a while away?
No, I suspect it will be still a while away. So the plan at the moment is for the government to get all adults vaccinated by the end of July, I believe. So I think it'll still be a little while before I get there. Currently still in that under 30 age group. So, and no pre-existing health conditions. So it'll certainly, I think, take a little while to get to me.
Back of the queue.
Back of the queue. But depending on where you live and, depending on the vaccination centers around you, I did have a friend of mine who this past week sits in the above 30 age group, but still sort of early 30s, having an SMS to say, we've got some extra. They obviously have expiry dates, so come along. You can get it. So who knows? I guess it all depends on supply and demand, but I still think it'll be a little while yet.
Yeah, hopefully sooner rather than later. I'm for sure very keen to get it as quickly as possible, so we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, the UK is certainly far outstripping us over here, South Africa. We're still doing it, taking our time, Chad. We're taking our time.
Yeah. The one other interesting development, which I think we must just briefly chat about, is that just before our call, there was a daily briefing with the, I think, Transport Minister. I didn't actually tune in. Grant Shapps, and effectively they were kind of unveiling the transport, the horizon for travel in the UK, international travel. And basically the 17th of May is now that date where that ban will lift and you can actually travel for leisure purposes too. So there's a list of green list countries, those that you can go to without quarantining. But the interesting thing is that a lot of those green list countries are still requiring UK travelers to quarantine on their sides. Although we're saying you don't have to quarantine on return, a lot of them are saying you need to quarantine on arrival. And the other interesting thing, Barry, is, kind of which dovetails nicely with the vaccine discussion, is that these countries as well, when you return back to the UK, you need to still get tested, even if you've had your 2 jabs. So a lot of people, finding that quite interesting, because we thought this would be, kind of an alternative, or you'd have a travel passport almost. But it seems like those PCR tests are not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, I think it's a reminder, Chad, that we are not done yet with the tickling our brain with those swabs or any of that stuff. All of that's still going to be in action for a long time to come. And even things like masks and whatnot, I think they're going to last a lot longer than people realize, because there's going to be excess caution, naturally, because of what we've been through in the last kind of 12 to 14 months. It really has been a traumatic period, and governments around the world are going to do whatever they can within like the realm of reasonability to protect against all these things. So I can imagine that international travel is still going to take a while to kind of get back to where it was. And if you're expecting to go on a holiday, you better have that 2 weeks extra for quarantine, because it's going to be part of it in some way, whether it's on the way back, whether it's on the way there, whatever the story is. It's not going to be as simple as it used to be for a while.
Yeah, those extra 2 weeks and that extra £150 for that PCR test.
That's a
but
lot
I mean,
of
at
money.
least it's better than the current scheme, which has the hotel quarantine, and that's
Sure.
north of £1,800. So I still think a lot of people will be quite keen on the prospect of booking some sort of holiday, even though it might not have been the same way as it was in the past. Cool. I think that's our COVID briefing for the last 2 weeks. Not much more to discuss. Obviously, there's loads to discuss, but I think we'll kind of pin it over there and keep talking on this developing story. We've been chatting more and more about every single week. Probably a lot of our listeners have zero interest in this, although they do listen to podcasts, so potentially you've got a little bit of an interest. But it was a really interesting story that you put here, Barry, and that is Facebook finally making the push into audio to take on Clubhouse. Clubhouse, we've been talking about it over the last few months. And there's been a few kind of features in this rollout, in this announcement from Facebook, Barry. So why don't you take us through a couple of them? Because I found a lot of them very interesting, especially the last.
Yeah, so I think it's hard to report on these things because a lot of it is still like in the early stages.
Yeah.
So we haven't seen any of it in practice yet. We don't exactly know what's going to happen, but it's been very clear that Facebook has been working on stuff. I remember when Mark Zuckerberg was first getting onto Clubhouse, everyone was like, oh boy, he's doing his research. he's getting into Clubhouse. Yeah. He's learning about the discussion, seeing how it all works so they can put it into Facebook. And so it was very much expected. We've seen Twitter and 1,000 other companies do the same thing, trying to compete. And so Facebook announced basically 3 separate audio kind of products, which is going to go on top of their platform, which is going to make it even more bulky, Chad. So I don't know how you feel about that, but we'll get to that in a moment. The first one is a direct copy of Clubhouse. It's that same old thing, live audio rooms, trying to do exactly what Twitter are doing with Twitter Spaces, and everyone else is trying to copy the Clubhouse formula, and basically allowing that kind of drop-in feel of being able to jump into a room whenever you want, and when the room is done, the audio disappears. And so taking that exact Clubhouse feature and putting it onto Facebook. So that's the first one. Not much to say in this respect, Chad. I don't know how many people are going to dive into this. Certainly in our generation, we're not spending time on Facebook like we used to spend, right? Like I think it's really aged up when it comes to the demographics. And so I don't know if we're going to see like mass adoption of this sort of thing going forward. But it'll be interesting to see how they do it, and if there's any significant changes, or if this is going to be a direct copy for copy.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see that. I'm intrigued to see where they're going to fit it in their app. Where on earth there's no space left, Barry? How many pages are you going to have to go through to finally get there? I almost feel like there needs to be a landing page when you open your app, and you can kind of say, okay, cool, which one am I driving today? Am I going to groups? Am I going to my news feed, if that even exists anymore? Am I going to Marketplace? Am I going to Pages? Am I going to the new audio section as well? It's kind of crazy. I don't know where it's all going to be squeezed in, but I have no doubt it's going to be slick and well integrated. I mean, we're just looking at a basic mock-up here on their website. They kind of announced in tandem with this announcement a few little images of what it might look like. And yeah, it certainly looks like it'll be slick and an enjoyable experience, I guess, which is always important. So that's the first one, live audio rooms. On the other two, have you heard of these? Kind of know anything about them?
Not that much, Chad. Like as I say, it's been very early days, and it's hard to get a sense of what they're trying to do. The second one is called Sound Bites, and as far as I understand, it's almost like a voice note. If you think about it, WhatsApp voice note, but you're sharing it publicly as well. You're not just sending it to one person. So Chad, me and you were chatting via voice note this morning, and so potentially people could be recording those sorts of pieces of content, just audio, and posting it on their feed. So Twitter have got this already. So on Twitter, if you want to make a tweet, you can make an audio tweet where it just records a little 20-second piece, and it's kind of similar to what Anchor originally was trying to do with these very bite-sized pieces. So I can imagine content creators with an idea just talking off the cuff for 2-3 minutes and posting that as a post on their feed, rather than writing it out, right? So that's what Soundbites is. I think it's interesting. I think audio still has a lot of room to grow. I certainly find myself listening to a lot more audio than I do video, just because you can do it while you're doing other stuff, like we chatted about in the past. And so I think it's an interesting kind of concept. I don't know exactly how it's going to work in the feed. Like you say, I think it's too busy already. I don't know how they keep adding things to this feed. It's just it gets so bulky and so like it's annoying. Like when I try and go and post this stuff on Facebook, on our Facebook page, Chad, I'm annoyed by the whole experience of Facebook pages, because there are 10,000 different things on that thing, and it takes you 14 clicks just to post something. It's crazy.
Yeah, definitely. So that soundbites thing sounds really interesting. I mean, on the Twitter feature, because I'm not as much of a Twitter user as you are, Barry, how's the take up been on that? Has it been only for content creators? Do you find any interesting, thought-provoking stuff? I mean, a lot of the appeal of Twitter is text. So for me, it was very interesting that they even went into that at all. And I guess it's less of a kind of on the go whenever you want to just get a dose of some thought-provoking material. You have to be strapped in. You've got your earphones all tuned in, and kind of able to I guess listen to varying levels of speakers, because not everyone is really great at presenting speech either.
Yeah, so Chad, I don't know if it's because of the people I follow, but I haven't seen one of these in weeks. So not even one on my feed.
Right.
So I don't think there's been any take-up. I don't think it's really worked. In the first week or two, because of the novelty, I saw quite a few people were testing it out and trying it. But like you say, Twitter is text. The whole point of Twitter is these very, very short text pieces. So it actually makes more sense on Facebook, like with Facebook Watch and all these platforms. Like it is more of that sort of platform. So maybe it's got a better chance than it did on Twitter. But if you just look at the Twitter traction, there was none to speak of, really.
Okay, very interesting. I don't think Facebook's going to have much, too much of a different traction. I mean, it is a different platform. I guess Facebook is more for family and friends, it feels, and less of a public space, whereas Twitter is very public. Of course, you get your pages and stuff, which you'll probably be able to do the same thing with on Facebook. But whether you have people just kind of updating their just life situation, or I don't know. I'd be interested to see how this works, because with video and the ability to share video on Facebook, I don't even see a lot of people doing that, authentically sharing things, personal things on video. So whether it'll change at all on this audio soundbite offering, I'm not too sure. The third thing that Facebook is adding, Barry, and I guess this is kind of a cool thing. Why don't you talk us through that?
Oh, Chad, believe it or not, this thing called a podcast. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's this really cool new development in the world of media. Yes, Facebook are adding podcasts to their platform. We chatted about it a lot in the past, talking about how Spotify are trying to get their hands on Apple's pie. Apple has been kind of the leader in podcast distribution for as long as it's been around. And the last year or two, Spotify have been throwing hundreds of millions of dollars at the platform. It's very clear now that podcasting is a huge medium, and that it really is it's the growth is still to come. Like, this thing is still relatively new, and so everyone is trying to get in on it. And if there's anything that Mark Zuckerberg likes to do is jump on trends, and so you'll be able to kind of host your podcast, I believe, through the Facebook platform. Cool. And kind of get all the distribution benefits, get added to your page and all that stuff, and start to collect subscribers for your podcast right in the app. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's well overdue. It makes a lot more sense if they want to control that media. And I'm just interested to see the implementation, Chad, because again it's yet another feature that's going to go onto this page. And so I'm cautiously optimistic that they might be able to just do something cool with it. But I'm not going to hold my breath just yet.
Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic too. I think it makes absolute sense, like you say, Barry. The ability to have your listeners comment and actually get that feedback. That's the one thing that we've felt on Across the Pond we've really struggled with, is getting that feedback from listeners on like specific episodes, where you'll be able to have a bit of engagement, I guess, just on your general following and specific posts you put out, but on your actual content, the actual thing that the reason you're here, I think it would be really, really cool to have some of our listeners be able to go in and drop a comment, let us know what they're thinking. So I think it does make sense. I think it definitely has a place, but it's all down to that integration gain, as we always say. So we'll have to see it does come out. Now, Barry, the thing that I found interesting about this and about this, I guess, this development in the world, this move into audio and live audio, is this last one over here. And that is a blog or kind of thread, forum, I think is the right word, called Reddit, which we obviously spoke about not too long ago, talking about GameStop to the moon. Reddit is now deciding, well, they're going to pivot quite a bit, I think, and they're also putting a kind of audio solution out, which they're calling Reddit Talk. What do you think about that?
I think it's really interesting, Chad. I think you're underselling Reddit a bit in the way you describe them. They are one of the top 10 websites in the world. They are a huge, huge deal. And they are a forum, but they're also so much more than that. I think there's no one that builds better communities than Reddit. Some of the subreddit communities that are available in every niche you can imagine are full of die-hard supporters who love the platform. And it's one of those platforms where you either spend 4 hours a day on it or you don't use it. There's very little in between, right? And so that's what I think makes this interesting, is that for very, very niche audiences where you've got this very specific community that's been built up, I think that Reddit audio could be really interesting for those sorts of communities. And so I think that is where they're going to have their potential advantage, Chad. I don't think you'll see like a big Joe Rogan mass market podcast doing really well on Reddit. Where I think you'll find success is some tiny little gardening club that's got 1,000 members on its subreddit that's very, very niche and very specific to something random and weird. Podcasts specifically on that topic to target towards those people on the platform they're already spending a lot of time on makes a lot of sense to me. And so I haven't seen the implementation. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to look like or how they're going to do it. But I'm a big fan of Reddit and the way they've built their products and the way they think about business. And so I'm curious to see this, Chad, and I'm quite excited about it, actually. I think they might be the ones to do something really unique and really special with the kind of generic podcasting platform.
Isn't it interesting to you, though, that we see all this development in the space of a couple of months? We have one kind of new innovator, Clubhouse, come out, and all of a sudden everyone's playing catch-up. All of a sudden everyone wants to get in this really exciting new space. But the space has been here for a long time. We've seen podcasts, we've seen kind of live streaming as a medium in terms of gaming, and a lot of other kind of live stream scenarios, shall I say. But all of a sudden everyone's keen to get involved. I think that's fascinating, all in the space of literally a couple of months.
Yeah, it's a natural life cycle of how these things work, Chad. If you go to any business school, you get an MBA, they'll teach you this product life cycle. You've got the early adopters right at the beginning who kind of get involved because they enjoy the novelty of it. And at the beginning, it's got no use cases. No one thinks it's a thing. Everyone thinks it's a weird idea. Then you get to sort of getting into mass market adoption. And by the time you get to where it's become cool, then everyone is diving in, Chad. And like you say, all of a sudden, every company around the world is trying to get in on this game. But what will happen is that after massive mass market adoption, when it starts to mature as a product, 90% of these players will fall away, right? So we come back to this in 2 or 3 years' time, Chad. 90% of these guys are not going to be around. And so the question is, like, which one is going to be around? Which is going to be the winner out of all these things? And if you had that answer, Chad, you could bet your money with buying some shares and make some good money. So if anyone's got a crystal ball out there, now's the time. Now's the time.
Yeah, now's the time indeed. Very interesting. Lots of exciting developments. I also think it's cool for us as users to have so many more options. And audio, what a great medium as a whole. Another great medium, Barry, something that we spend a lot of time in during lockdown is video and Netflix specifically. The powerful Netflix making its way into the Oscars. We spoke about one of our favorite documentaries of last year, My Octopus Teacher, and we speak about how amazing we both found it on a visual level, on a just, I guess, storyline level. It kind of hit all the feels. It really kind of got us through lockdown, I guess. And, getting away with an Oscar.
Absolutely amazing, Chad. And like you say, we were very invested in this movie because we had talked about it so much. And I never thought I was going to cry watching an octopus movie, but I did. So that's how powerful and emotional it actually was. And it was really cool to see. And also the South African connection, which you didn't mention, like this idea that it was down in Cape Town and this very much this one lonely South African man who put this whole thing together, right? And managed to pull off an absolutely insane documentary. And so the fact that it won the Oscar for Best Documentary was super cool to see. I certainly was waving my South African flag with pride.
Cool.
Very, very happy to see it. And yeah, it's one of those ones, if you haven't seen it yet and you've heard us talking about it time and time again, please go and do yourself a favor.
Definitely.
If winning the Oscar is not enough for you, then I don't know what's going to convince you, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Not a whole lot more to say on it. I mean, we spent almost a full episode talking about it the last time. So yeah, definitely go and check it out if you haven't. But just the kind of discussions that come from this, Barry, is I guess the power of Netflix and being able to command the sort of audiences that it has. How My Octopus Teacher literally lands itself there with an Oscar. The kind of the ability to spread word of mouth. I mean, in lockdowns, one of the things we've been speaking about, just because we've not really had much else going on in our lives, is what we've been watching and the content we've been consuming. And 9 out of 10 conversations I have with people surround what are you watching on Netflix? What's good to see? Because we've all got this subscription. We're all trying to get more from this subscription. And I guess with all those eyeballs and having that big power, this documentary was able to land itself there. Don't you think that's fascinating? And I mean, in previous years, I think it would have really struggled to win sort of best documentary.
Yeah, I agree. And the way I think about it, Chad, is that they've thrown so much money, like Netflix have thrown so much money into producing content, into buying content, into getting curating the world's best stuff on Netflix. Like, it really is an incredible platform and has so much amazing stuff there. And I think it's a matter of they spend billions and billions of dollars on this content, knowing that 90% of the shows are not going to be a hit. 95% are not going to even be on the radar, right? But the only way to get to those hits, so apps, the Game of Thrones, the life-changing series, the only way to do that is to have lots of shots, have lots of different opportunities and try a bunch of times. And so Netflix, what they've done really well is that they've got this ginormous catalog, and they just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
If you had come to me, Chad, with this idea about this film of an octopus, and told me it was going to win an Oscar with one dude filming one octopus, I mean, I would have told you were crazy, right? But it's this ability to get onto Netflix and get your work in front of millions of people and let them decide as to what is really popular, and that is special. And so I think the power is certainly in the hands of Netflix. These poor movie studios, these poor cinema chains are in big trouble, because one of the other movies that won, Chad, was an animated movie called Soul, which was a Jamie Foxx movie, and that really did incredibly well. And we chatted about that. It went straight to Disney Plus. It didn't go anywhere near a cinema, and of course it's because of COVID. But it's a sign of the times, Chad, is that these cinemas are not going to survive going forward because these streaming platforms are becoming way too powerful.
Yeah, I completely agree. Have you seen Soul? I mean, I was going to get to it, Barry. It was certainly part of what I wanted to discuss today. Have you seen Soul?
Chad, I haven't, and I know it's terrible. I need to see it. I've been dying to see it, but I haven't got around to it yet.
It's so good, Barry. I actually, my Disney Plus subscription had run out, and I was looking through. You had the Oscars here. I was like, okay, let's have a look. Let's see, because I was quite surprised. Obviously, not a lot of stuff was released last year, so I was quite intrigued, really, to see what stuff was nominated more than anything else. And to see Soul, I think it won an award for the music score. I might be, I stand to be corrected, but to see that there, it certainly caught my eye. And straight after watching the trailer, I had to download Disney Plus again and get the let's try it again. Subscription going. What a movie, Barry! What an absolute movie. The animation has gone so far in the last couple of years. I cannot believe it. Obviously, I'm kind of in an Airbnb watching on not a 4K TV, but even so, the visuals are just absolutely remarkable. it really is an exciting space, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed it, just in terms of the storyline as well. This idea that you kind of, before you are brought onto the earth, your soul goes through this kind of what's the word, like boot camp almost, to discover what your things are going to be, what your character traits are going to be, all of that kind of stuff, and that all sits inside of you. And so to see the story with so many other little side aspects as well, and of course some great jazz, which is always great, and we do love a bit of good jazz, was really satisfying to watch. So I highly recommend you throw that high up onto your list, Barry.
That's really cool, Chad. I've heard only good things about it, and I'm dying to see it. Another kind of groundbreaking moment is that it was the first Disney animated film that was the star was a black person, which also was a big deal for culture. So if you think of all the huge Disney Pixar films, obviously they are iconic, and they are kind of the canon of animation. And like you said, there's a reason that they've done so well. And so it was super cool to see Jamie Foxx getting to voice the character. And no one better, in my opinion. I love Jamie Foxx. He is such a talented man. His musicianship, his acting, his voice acting is absolutely superb. And so I need to get my A to G, Chad. I need to figure it out, find myself a Disney Plus subscription, and get to see Soul before too late.
Jamie Foxx, we had some other great voices in there too, but yeah, just a great movie all around. So definitely recommend you watch it. While we're on this Oscars, Barry, one other thing I wanted to talk about is just the appetite of viewers to tune in to an awards ceremony. I think the level of prestige kind of just feels to me like it can't be replicated in a virtual setting. I mean, we've spoken about it before in a limited sense with competitions like The Voice, and trying to get audiences, trying to get that trying to reproduce that feeling. But it definitely feels to me like the appetite for awards ceremonies is dropping. Second to none. We in terms of the actual ratings that they received on these Oscars. The previous year had a rating of 23.6 million, and this year kind of almost less than half that, Barry, and that is 10.4 million. And you've also got to keep this into context to looking back on big years with big releases. The Titanic, which was released in 1998, that won 11 Oscars. Ratings there were 57 million. So we're looking at a measly 10.4 million, and I'm not surprised by that, to be honest. I kind of, it wasn't an event in my calendar, nothing I was going to stay up for. What do you think about that? Award ceremonies in a virtual setting?
Yeah, I don't even think obviously the virtual plays a role, but I don't think that's the reason that this downward trend is happening. I think the reason is that in the past, you relied on those gatekeepers to let you know what you should be watching, right? So people would go and watch the Oscars to figure out, cool, what movies should I be looking into? In today's world, with the algorithms and kind of the choice that we now have, you can go and do your own niche kind of viewing habits and just watch what you like. You don't have to listen to a mainstream gatekeeper in the sense of an academy to say, cool, these are the best movies for this year. And so with all of us, like, the mass market movies aren't working as much as they used to because people need to be making movies for smaller audiences, in a sense, or for audiences that care about certain things. And so I think we've seen it in music, we've seen it in text, and now we're seeing it in film as well, is that these kind of centralized platforms that are trying to tell you what is a good movie and what isn't a good movie just don't matter as much as they used to matter. Because you've got so much more choice. When you go to Netflix, you've got 10,000 movies to choose from. You don't have the 12 at the cinema to choose from, in a sense. And so I think this is a trend we continue to see, Chad. I think the days of, obviously it's still going to be a status thing, and people are still going to want to win them for the nostalgia and kind of the whole show of it is still kind of the place to be for actors. But from my perspective, I'm more than happy just to wake up the next morning and read the results. I don't have to watch the thing,
I fully agree. I feel exactly the same way. But I do think it's a very interesting kind of transition that we're seeing, which naturally will happen in tandem with moving to online streaming services. And like you say, being able to kind of decide yourself on what to watch, it makes a whole lot of sense. Barry, let's then move on.
Stuff I found interesting.
Chad, I'm so excited about this. I don't know if you follow this at all, but it is one of the greatest internet stories I think I've ever come across. And it's known affectionately as the Josh fight, right? So what happened was, Chad, I don't know if you, I think everyone's had this experience. You go into your Facebook and you get added to these scam groups.
Yes,
With, like this
definitely.
group message with like absolute randoms, and people are either trying to scam you, trying to fish you,
Yep.
trying to whatever. And you end up deleting all those groups because they're just annoying, right? Well, someone on Facebook, a guy by the name of Josh, believe it or not, decided that he was going to go into Facebook and invite every single Josh that he could find around the world into this Facebook group. So he ends up with this group of, I don't know how many thousand Joshes, but like gazillions of Joshes. And so you just see the list of the names. It goes Josh, 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 Josh. Absolutely amazing. And he writes a message, Chad. He says, in 1 year's time, he gives a date, he gives a time, and he gives a coordinates. He says there's going to be a Josh fight. And the winner of the fight, the one who's left standing, the last one standing, gets to keep the name Josh, and everyone else has to change their name. They're going to decide who the real Josh is. So it's one of these memes. It's one of these things that it looks really funny. I'm sure you got like, a good laugh when you kind of open the message if you're a Josh. But Chad, it actually happened. The day actually arrived, and hundreds of Joshes turned up to these coordinates to have this noodle fight. And for the next hour or two, they were fighting each other with these noodles, trying to figure out who's going to be the last standing Josh. And Chad, I'm very happy to say is that the final Josh that was decided was none other than 5-year-old Josh, who got given a crown, and he's now the only person who can be called Josh. So if you're a Josh right now, you've got to change your name, Chad.
Just a crazy story. I mean, I love this story. I love this. This was such a cool kind of mood boosting thing to see. We've all, like you said, we've all been in that place where you're in that random group and you get all these messages. I just thought it was hilarious that people actually turned up at this location. And we're just flicking some visuals across the screen right now. I just wonder how it was moderated, Barry. How was it filtered down? How are all of these Joshes filtered down until the reigning champion, gets to keep his crown? And his crown, I mean, to me, looks to be a Burger King crown, which I think is also apt for a 5-year-old. Who is the one and only Josh who is allowed to reign the earth, Barry.
Indeed. I believe it was to the death. I believe everyone else was stabbed by the noodles, so I think it was a fight to the death. And
Right.
good old 5-year-old Josh, like you say, comes out with the Burger King crown and is the one true Josh. And so a really, really heartwarming story. This is why I love the internet, Chad. It's stories like this that remind me how wonderful the internet is. And for all of its ills, for all of its chaos, for all of the drama that it brings, it gives you these moments of absolute joy. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Well, thanks for bringing it up, Barry. I love the internet for the exact same reason. Also brought me a bit of joy, but not as funny necessarily, but just in terms of the novelty of it is this video that I'm showing across the screen right now as well. And for those who are listening after the fact, it reminds me of a video Barry mentioned not too long ago. I think that one was in Paris or something. And this is a video that was shot in around, they say around because they don't know the exact date, around 1900. It was a black and white video, film piece of footage, of course, that's kind of since gone through the technology we have at the moment. It's been brought to life, brought to color from its original black and white form. And it's a film set in no other than London, in various locations of London. And I just think it's so cool, Barry. You got these horses walking around with their various carriages, carrying people, carrying freight, carrying all sorts of stuff. I mean, if you've ever been to London, you've seen the mews that kind of jot off along different streets, and you can kind of still see the cobbles. You can still see the horse stables almost, which people have now turned into all sorts of other living quarters or whatever you want to call it. Not just that, Barry, but you see these guys walking around with their top hats. It's a fascinating kind of look back in time. And when I was in school, I would never have appreciated this. But now being in London, being able to see this sort of footage of how life was, 100 years ago or so, I find it fascinating.
Chad, my main takeaway from this was how well people dressed. Like you said, the top hats, the suits, the coat and tails. Everyone was looking absolutely sharp all of the time.
Yeah.
Not like today when most of us are in sweatpants and a hoodie. Like it's very, very different today.
Yeah.
And so it really is a wonderful video to see, like you say. And it's almost like a reminder that this actually was how life used to be. Sometimes we can watch a TV series that is set in this era, and we kind of forget that this is actually what it used to be like, right? You used to be able to you jump on a horse and cart and kind of go around town, and you're wearing your top hats, and there's people riding their horse to work, I'm assuming, which is crazy to think about. And what's really cool is that this technology of being able to bring color and bring kind of remastering and the sort of stuff to really old footage can really be a great help for us in trying to tell history to people, right? If you were in school and you got to see this as opposed to those grainy videos and photos, it brings it to life in a way that just doesn't happen with the old stuff. And so, Chad, thank you for bringing this up. This is really cool. If you're only listening to this podcast, please go and check this out. It really is a cool little video to show you what life was like in London back in the early 1900s.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. And not just watching this video, Barry, but it also, obviously, after Facebook saw me spending some time on this, because I saw this video on Facebook, I got thrown into the rabbit hole. There's a wonderful page on Facebook, which is called Old London Photographs. And I got cast into this weird rabbit hole, Barry, looking at all sorts of old school photos of London. In this group, and loads of passionate members who obviously have photos from their archives, a lot of people from the sort of older generation. But it's this wonderful niche kind of black hole that you kind of get cast along into. And I loved it. I must be honest, I really enjoyed it.
It's one of the few moments, Chad, when the social media algorithm actually gives you something of joy, right? And actually gives you something that you wouldn't have found otherwise. I think there's a lot of nostalgia in that, and especially if it's the place that you live or the place that you're from, it really means a hell of a lot to be able to see where it's come from. All of us carry around these stories about our origins and where we come from and our cultural and all that sort of thing, and to see that in vivid technicolor, or even just not even color, but even just like a vivid picture of a place that you know very well, it's really, really cool. And so, Chad's putting this up on the screen, and it looks really cool. And London's one of those cities, it's very aesthetic as is, right? London's a beautiful, beautiful city, and it's with so much history to it. And so that's really cool. That's epic.
Yeah, really epic. Recommend, if this sounds interesting to you, definitely go and check it out on Facebook. Like I said, the group is called Old London Photographs. There's all sorts of rules and stuff you need to sign up to before, as in any group, I guess, on Facebook, before you kind of actually get in and are able to participate. But I think
they got to check you're not a fake Josh, Chad. They got to check you're not a fake Josh.
Exactly. There's only one real deal.
There's only one Josh.
Well, Barry, let's then move on to our next segment.
Looking ahead.
So, Chad, I came across an idea that isn't mine, but I kind of want to claim it because I feel like I thought about it about a year ago, and I saw someone articulate it, and it was one of those things where you see someone say something, you're like, oh, that's what I was thinking. Like, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to take partial credits with a pinch of salt. But the idea is that we've chatted about Netflix, about how they're this ginormous content platform, and they're well known for their documentaries, for their movies, and for their TV shows, of course. But they have this amazing audience now. They've got these millions and millions of loyal fans. I wonder why they don't get into education. And maybe that is part of their plan going forward, is to bring some more educational content onto the platform. We've chatted a bit about how series like The Crown are able to really reanimate history in a way that makes it super engaging and super compelling. And what if you could bring that sort of production value, that sort of budgets, to something that's actually like non-fiction and is educational in some way. I don't know if you know the platform Masterclass. It's this very, very highly produced kind of platform where they bring the best of the best. So you get Serena Williams teaching you tennis, or you get Martin Scorsese teaching you directing, or all of these amazing people at the top of their game giving like a real class on what they're doing. And it's very well produced. It's quite expensive as a platform. I wonder if Netflix doesn't buy them at some stage and pulls that content onto Netflix itself, because I think that could be an amazing platform for them to get new content in front of people who normally wouldn't watch it, but also to capitalize on this idea of this education being part of like education / entertainment. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both. And so I wanted to hear your thoughts on that. If you think that's potentially somewhere Netflix could go in the future.
I love this idea because I love the idea of masterclass, and I have found myself on this page so many times, Barry. So close to entering my card details, so close to hitting order. But the only thing here, and I think the struggle here, Barry, is the price point that masterclass are currently charging. It's interesting though, because you kind of do it in an annual plan. They've got this promotion, as you can see at the bottom of my screen, 2 annual memberships for £170. I guess it would kind of work its way out to, I don't know, maybe 1.5 Netflix subscriptions. This as a standalone, by itself. I definitely think if you could get it in front of a lot more people, potentially you could drop that price, and I think you'd have a lot of appetite. A lot of our idols are sitting out here teaching you their craft. We've got just in front of the screen right now as I'm going, you got Dead Mouse, you got Carlos Santana, Armin van Buuren. Obviously, this is all on the music side. But then when you move into acting, you've got Steve Martin, Samuel L. Jackson, Usher's talking dancing and performance. Christina Aguilera is teaching you singing. You really do have the cream of the crop. And for someone like me who really appreciates production value, Masterclass is your place to go. Like I said, I've been so close to hitting that get started button, and I have hit it once or twice. Toyed with the idea of kind of sharing a subscription with a friend, because there is this 2 annual memberships option. But it's just at that price point, Barry, that I really don't think this is kind of mass appeal because of the price point that it's at. But it's a fascinating idea if Netflix could come in there and kind of have this extra super highly produced content that is valuable, and I guess takes away that feeling of binging, that feeling of Netflix took away a whole lot of time from me. And it would change what Netflix, the whole idea of Netflix, the connotations. Well, what did you do this weekend? I spent my weekend watching Netflix. I watched a really interesting class on photography that Annie Leibovitz took. And I think that would be huge for the platform. I really do think it would be good. Even if they introduced an extra plan that was maybe incrementally more, but not as much as these 2 subscriptions would be together. I think it's a great idea. Out of all of these, whose class are you most keen on taking? We've got Malcolm Gladwell is here as well on writing.
Chad, my favorite, and I'm in the same position as you. I've nearly clicked order on multiple occasions. Is Aaron Sorkin, who is my favorite screenwriter in the whole world. I absolutely love his stuff, and he's got a screenwriting class on there, and so I would have loved to take his class. But like you say, the cost is it's crazy. It really is crazy. I've chatted to a friend of mine who actually paid for it, and he was giving me kind of his honest feedback, and he was saying that it is really valuable. Like, it's really cool to see these guys chat about like what really matters to them and how they go about what they do. But he didn't think the value was there in a sense, unless you're consuming multiple of these. But for like someone like me, if I'm just trying to get the Aaron Sorkin one, I can't just rent that one. I have to get the annual subscription and kind of go with it from there. And the reason I think this works for Netflix is because they're already halfway there. At any point in time, you go to kind of the top 10 on Netflix on your app. A lot of times there is kind of a documentary type thing on there, whether it's about doping in the Olympics or whatever is the kind of the hot topic at the moment. There are kind of documentary style things that are on Netflix in a way that feels natural and feels native to the platform, and I can imagine them doing this. And Masterclass makes sense because it's very highly produced and it's a direct fit to Netflix because of the way it's all put together. But I could also see them buying like an actual online course company, so a Coursera or Udacity or one of these guys, and actually sitting and watching these courses, these video lectures on whatever topic on Netflix as well. And so I think it's an interesting idea. I think that it's a place where they could really kind of nail down their status as the home for content in a way, and they could compete with YouTube in this sense. Like YouTube is very educational. There's lots of amazing
Yeah,
educational stuff
definitely.
on YouTube, and that's where a lot of us go to watch lectures and interviews and these sorts of things. And so that's where I think Netflix could compete with YouTube if they kind of took the higher end of the market, the well-produced, well-published, like niche, very specific educational pieces of content. I think they'd do incredibly well, and it really would justify that Netflix price. Even if they raise the
Yeah.
Netflix price, it really
Yeah.
would justify that monthly subscription. If, like you say, instead of sitting and watching the 27th episode of Friends, you could actually sit and do something more productive. That would be really cool. And so I, for one, hope that that's something we see in the future, Chad.
Let's hope. There certainly is appetite for this kind of content. There's no doubt about that. Just the fact that both of us have been so close, but didn't quite get that far, just shows you. I mean, I've tried Skillshare as well. Even that, which is a lower price point, I still didn't feel like the value was there because of the production value. That's kind of self-produced stuff, whereas masterclass at the Skillshare level of price feels more right to me. But I guess maybe I'm trying to be a bit too cheap here. It would be great, and we can only dream, right? So let's hope somebody at Netflix is listening to this episode. You never know. You never know. We might see that roll out at some point in the future. Shall we move on then, Barry?
Let's move on, Chad.
Develop and grow.
Right, so Chad, on Develop and Grow this week, I want to bring something to you and hear your thoughts, because I it's one of those things that I've been struggling with in the last little bit. And that is, last week at hockey practice, we were in training. It was a cold Joburg night, one of those nights where just like dry, that coldness, and I was standing at the back of the drill waiting for my turn, and everything was going well, and I got to the front and I sprinted forward to collect the ball as I needed to, and changed direction and felt my entire hamstring go, Chad. It was just that terrible moments where you just feel like, and I thought I had torn it at the time. It was very, very painful. I kind of lay on the ground, writhing in pain, and kind of hobbled off to the side, hobbled to my car, and managed to somehow drive home and got back home in one piece. But it's a hamstring problem that it's been recurring for me for the last 4 or 5 years now. I've known my whole sporting career, and my hamstrings have always been my problem. And exactly. That's how I felt, Chad. And so, yeah, it's been something I've really struggled with the last couple of years, and it's every time I pull it, and then I kind of recover, and I think I've got it back to where it should be, and I just think they're weak, and I probably don't stretch them enough, and I don't take good enough care of them. But the point I wanted to bring up is that this is a physical injury. This is very much a physical thing, right? And so I feel the pain in my hamstring. I take the painkillers, I ice it, and eventually get to a point where you kind of get back to recovery. But what I found most interesting about this injury is the impact it has on the rest of my life, right? So theoretically, a hamstring injury, like it shouldn't affect your work. It shouldn't affect your relationships because it's very isolated to your body. But what I found is that it's the absolute opposite, and that these physical injuries, are actually more psychological than we realize. It had a huge impact on my mood. For the next couple of days after that injury, I felt really down. I felt really it was almost like my ego had been hurt at the same time as my hamstring, because all of a sudden I couldn't put my socks on. I couldn't bend in the way I wanted to. I couldn't obviously walk or run or anything. I couldn't drive anywhere. And so what I wanted to talk about is the psychological impact of these injuries, and this idea of this mind-body connection, that your body is not separate to your mind. Like, no matter how much you like to think it is, an injury like that has an impact on every other facet of your life. I would love to hear your thoughts on that, Chad.
I'm not surprised, dude. I can see why you'd be bummed. I mean, we were talking about that was one of the other reasons why we couldn't record the podcast, is that Barry couldn't get in his car, to drive where he needed to drive, and I understand that lack of independence, is so frustrating, especially when it's your own body. You almost feel like you've been let down a little bit, and you start to kind of question the strength of the rest of your body that's currently working all fine. But you kind of wonder whether it's going to carry you a whole lot further. But the thing is, Barry, a couple of weeks, and the necessary time that it needs to heal. And you might not be sprinting on a hockey field, but your body's kind of repaired itself, and I think that's the great sort of silver lining to look for here. But it is interesting, and I think the ego thing is also a really important one, because we do like to think of ourselves as really healthy, super fit. Even though we don't we don't do all the training, we don't, like you say, we don't do the necessary stretching, any of that kind of stuff. We always like to portray ourselves as that, and the first time that kind of assumption or that assertion, I guess, gets challenged by something like this, it's only natural for us to be really let down by it. And just a few activities that you can't participate in, a few places you can't get to, a few nights of not sleeping very well because you can't find a comfortable position, and it's understandable that you're going to be at that level of bum that you were. So I think it's an interesting one. I also had I don't think it was as serious of an injury, Barry, but playing tag rugby the other week, I hurt the back of my thumb here. A guy kind of ran into me, and it pulled back, and it was not great. My whole thumb went like purple. And also, like you say, the intricacies of just at the end, the silly little things that you get embarrassed by. So like right at the end of the tag rugby practice when I need to put my shoes on and I can't do my laces, that kind of feeling, like you said, it hits the ego straight away, and you've got people who are now waiting for you because you're taking long to put your laces on and you can't do it. It's kind of a vicious cycle. And anyway, I'm rambling now, but I get you. I felt the same in the last couple of weeks, and it's not a great place to be.
Yeah, I think another important point is what you alluded to is age, Chad. Like, in my mind, I still see myself as that 21-year-old who didn't have to stretch, right? Who was fast and fit and strong because I was training 7 times a week when I was at varsity. In those days, I was playing hockey for Wits, and we had 2 gym sessions in early morning. We had 2 night practice sessions. We were playing a game. I was in the best shape of my life, right? And right now, it's a very different life stage. Like, I'm trying to run a business, and we're much older. We don't recover as quickly as we used to. And I think that's where the ego comes in, is that I'm frustrated that my body is not responding in the way that I remembered it did. Yeah. But that's just how things go over time, and you have to learn to kind of transition into these new phases. I have to learn to look after my hamstring. I can't just ignore it like I used to be able to do, right? And so that is one thing that is it's a tough pill to swallow, Chad. Is when you're getting to the wrong side of your 20s, things start to take a bit longer to recover, and you're not as sharp as you used to be. But I think it's a good point that it's trying to understand the beauty of your body repairing itself, and trying to kind of be in that, and actually like celebrate that ability to get back to where it should be. It's a miracle in a sense. It really is an incredible thing to see, and it's a reminder just to kind of get those habits right. Like, the biggest thing for me is that I now need to get a stretching routine going. I need to be taking care of it. I need to go and see a biokineticist and see if I can strengthen it in some way to try and not have it happen again in the future. All those bits and pieces, if this is a trigger to improve your life, then hopefully that's a good thing. And those few days of being miserable and kind of wallowing in self-pity because you can't put your own socks on, or you can't drive to the shops, or whatever the story is, that's a very small price to pay for that longer term gratitude, in a sense. And it also reminds you that, like, what's that saying, Chad, is that when you're healthy, you take your health for granted. But when you get a runny nose, and all of a sudden the only thing you want is that runny nose to be gone. And it's only in the moments of when your body's not working in the way it is that it reminds you of how well it normally works, and how we just take it completely for granted. And so that's something I'm trying to do, is realize that all those years where my hamstring was fine, I took it for granted, right? Because everything worked as it should. And so I really should be more grateful for the fact that my body does still work pretty well, all things considered.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it's the exact thing you're thinking about, but like you don't know what you've got until it's gone, kind of thing. I think it kind of echoes that. And I mean, you're so right. Like, even just you told me about how frustrated you were about going for a run, and you wanted to go for a longer run the other day. and getting quite frustrated about not being able to run the sort of distances you were before. And so it is a reminder that when you are at that level of fitness, just think about everyone else. Like, kind of do it for those who can't, and just appreciate it. I guess be grateful for it. I think it's great. On your point about the age, I know we kind of running over a bit, Barry, but I think it is an important thing. People think we might be a little bit dramatic because we are still, like a younger sort of, like you say, late 20s, 29, around there. But we're not quite 30 yet, and a lot of people will still say, "Well, that's still really young. You guys are still spring chickens." But I feel it. I honestly feel the age a little bit. I get tired a lot more often. I feel that stiffness. It doesn't go away as quickly as it does if I have a drink the night before. That stays in your system just that little bit longer. I definitely feel it. I definitely feel like I'm becoming an old man in a sense, and I don't know if it's a quarter life crisis or something, but I'm feeling it. My hip is clicking when I stand up from a long session at work. Getting old, dude.
I can certainly relate to that, Chad. And like you say, I feel a bit guilty complaining about it, because like you say, you'll speak to a 40-year-old or 50-year-old or 60-year-old and they'll say, you don't even know. and they look at us and they laugh because they've got the experience. But all we know is our 20s. And so obviously it's going to feel weird to us going through these changes. And I'm sure when we're 40, Chad, we'll look back on our 29-year-old body and be like, I'd love to be that 29-year-old body, right?
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where it feels weird to complain about, because we are still young, and we do still have a lot ahead of us. But what I'm realizing is that prioritizing my health and mobility and agility and strength and all that stuff is way more important than I ever realized. Like, intellectually I know it, but if you were to look at my calendar, if you look at the amount of time I'm spending on my health, it's minimal. It's absolutely minimal. And that's something I need to change. I've been struggling a little bit with the fact that I've been working my butt off for the last couple of months and have basically no time to look after myself. And that self-care, that taking care of yourself when it comes to diet and exercise and just getting out in the fresh air and stretching and all these things, they seem small. And by the time you get the injury, it's too late then. In a sense, like, it's too late to then decide, okay, I'm going to turn my life around. You actually have to be doing it consistently over time, and you're not going to realize the benefit it's having because it's preventing something. In a sense, it's very different to going to the gym and lifting weights because you want to get bigger biceps. Like, you can see the progress there, which makes it easier to do. But something like stretching or something like looking after your hip, whatever the story is, you can't see the progress in a sense. And so it's harder to keep yourself on the straight and narrow. And you almost have to make it a part of your weekly routine. And that's what I need to try and do going forward.
Great idea. Need to do the exact same thing. Guilty on all counts on the side. But we'll I guess keep working at it. That's the whole point of this section of the podcast. It's develop and grow. We're constantly growing, constantly learning, constantly developing in a sense. The last thing I wanted to talk about today, Barry, as I said, I know we're already a little bit over, but I saw this little thing on Instagram today, and for all the hours you spend on it in a day, sometimes there's an idea or a great kind of graphic that swings past you that really makes you think, and I think it's really so effective. So I'm going to bring it up on the screen. And it's something that a page by the name of anxiety_wellbeing posted. And that is, don't let one setback color your day. And it's this really effective kind of illustration where you've got this shade of yellow, which is you in the morning, kind of waking up feeling pretty good. You're fresh. You've got energy. Everything's going well. And then there's a stark kind of red line. Something bad happens, and it's far too easy to then the rest of your day have a kind of, it's a lighter shade of red, but it's still a shade of red, kind of letting this one setback color the rest of your day, set the tone for the rest of the day, set your mindset for the rest of the day. It's something that's so easy to do. I was speaking to somebody the other day who had a really bad incident happen, and was kind of just dwelling on it, like not getting past it. The rest of the day is going to be bad. Like it's bound to be bad because this one thing happened. And the alternative that this graphic presents is pause and feel it, and then keep going. And what you instead have is you have your yellow on the left, you've got your stark red line, and then slowly you've got a gradient fading from that red all the way back slowly to your yellow. And I think that's just that constant reminder that we keep talking about, Barry, and that is that you get to choose your mindset, you get to choose your perspective and your outlook. And being able to stop and feel, which I think a lot of people don't want to do. Be annoyed, like have a cry, scream at that person you need to scream at, let it out, like feel it, and then try and kind of reframe yourself and carry on with your day. What do you think?
I think it's really cool, Chad. It's a really cool graphic, and I definitely going to go and save this after you've now brought it up. I need to go and keep this somewhere and maybe print it out or whatever. It's a beautiful illustration of this idea. And I don't know what it says about me, Chad, but 2 different Frozen songs came to me when I saw this graphic.
Okay.
The first one being Let It Go, this idea of being able to let something go straight after it happens and try and move forward as best you can. And the second one is one we chatted about way back in the day, one of the first few episodes, is do the next right thing. It's this idea of like looking forward and not spending your life worrying about what happened in the past, not looking in the rearview mirror, just focusing what can you do in this moment? What is the next right decision you can make? And I think that's what this comes down to, is that we're going to have these speed bumps. We're going to have those things that happen to you that really kind of can disrupt your entire day, and even longer. It can be months, years even, of these things affecting how you go about your life. And it's important to try and realize that those things are fleeting, and we only fuel them by continuing to ruminate on them, continuing to think about them, continuing to tell ourselves those stories. Whereas in effect, it happened behind us, and we can choose to tell a different story moving forward. We can choose to just focus on the next decision, the next step in front of us, and not worry about what happened in the past. It's obviously much easier said than done. I think we all hold grudges. We all are resentful about certain things. We all we hold these things as if they're personal attacks on us in a lot of cases. And I think with wisdom and with time, you can get better at trying to just don't worry about what happened in the past. What's done is done. And if you can just keep moving forward and make the most of what's to come, that's the best way to do it.
Absolutely. So right. You've always got that choice. And I guess that's the key idea of this graphic. Well, Barry, that brings us to the end of another episode that's taken quite a long time for us to get to. But I don't think we were as rusty as we thought, weirdly enough. It's kind of like riding a bicycle once we're here, once we're in the seat, once we've got the microphones in front of us, both of which now belong to the same family, which I'm quite excited about, the Shure family. Once we're on that bicycle, it seems to kind of be free-flowing and smooth and all back to normal. So really glad we got to have this hour and a half and finally kind of lay something down.
Indeed, Chad. It was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it. I think we covered a lot of ground today, a lot of good stuff, and I hope that you found something of value. If you made it this far, you're a champion, and I hope there's something in this podcast that's made you think a little bit differently, or made you kind of ruminate on some things, whether it's just the tech or whether it's just more deeper stuff in the develop and grow section. I certainly find that this stuff helps me to talk through some of my ideas, and so sometimes we waffle, sometimes we mumble through our stuff, but hopefully there's some golden nuggets you can take and apply to your own life.
Exactly. We hope there's loads of those that you can kind of take with you wherever you go. That's the point. All of those little golden nuggets. If you want to just get a little bit more from us, do go and check out our social media pages. We are, of course, on Twitter at @across_podcast. We're on Instagram at @acrossthepondcast. We're on Facebook, Across the Pond Podcast. And there's one more, Barry. We're on Twitch now too, and hopefully this live stream is working to Twitch. It should be, but we are there at ATP Podcast. So lots of platforms, all for Barry to have a lot of good fun with in his free time, of which there's not a lot of.
And no TikTok just yet, Chad. We're not on TikTok just yet. I know our fans are clamoring for it, but be patient.
Yeah, we'll get there eventually. But until then, that's everything for today. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, we'll see you again next week.